Year, went away to Penn State for my undergrad, in the late 80s. Family that were mostly farmers, preachers, and teachers, and I went away to get a teaching degree. Came out with enough debt for 6 people. And as a result, one of the 42 different jobs I did to work my way through college was working as a sales rep for Nabisco. I used to put cookies on the shelf down here on the shore, and they offered me a sales job to start out, and I thought, I'll do that until the right teaching job comes along. And a couple years later, I was calling on the #2 customer nationally and doing well, and mortgage and kids, I couldn't just go, oh yeah, let me go back to my $25,000 a year teaching job. Got recruited to Pepsi and ran most of the state of Pennsylvania for Pepsi, and got a Six Sigma Master Black Belt while I was there, and actually got to train directly under one of Jack Welch's key lieutenants. And it kind of was the seminal change to get me back to education. I met the founder of Edison Schools, Chris Whittle, who was one of the preeminent early adapters there, but also a bit of a renegade or a maverick in the space. And he said, look, we're a bunch of passionate educators who are about to go under. We need some sustainable business practices, and you know enough about education to be dangerous and more about business, and come join us. And that ended up being like the laboratory of my career, because it all became about how do you bring business applications into education, but still recognize that education is a unique animal all to itself. And so there are some applicability, but it's kind of being, I said over a couple of years later that I became the translator at the table.
Yeah, what was the name of the company again?
Edison Schools.
Right, and so the president of Yale joined that.
Yes,
board.
Benno Schmidt was one of our early board members. Yes, Benno. There were some incredible thinkers that were part of that. John Chubb became my mentor, and he passed away a few years ago. But like Chris Cerf, who ended up being the commissioner of education in New Jersey, and also was part of the New York City schools. So incredible incubator. And it really was. I learned everything to do and to not to do. And while we were there, I helped start 56 different charter schools around the country.
Oh, no kidding.
Including 4 down in New Orleans after Katrina. So it learned a ton, was recruited then into higher ed a little bit. So I ended up working for University of Maryland and Purdue University in corporate and community partnerships. How do you engage the community? How do you bring businesses in? And how do you connect education at the centerpiece for that? So it's kind of become defining for my career. Came home finally. I did have a sister who was a longtime educator, unfortunately died at 51 with cancer. And I was flexible enough in my scheduling then to be able to come back. And that's when I just fell in love with the Eastern Shore.
What year was that?
2018 was when I moved back. And was still traveling quite a bit, but was able to help her through a bunch of her cancer treatments. Then when she passed, suddenly Dad's needs were greater, and I was the oldest. And I'm very blessed. I do a lot of consulting, and the consulting flexibility allowed me to help with family and be able to do this. So that's when I started kind of meeting with business leaders in Dorchester, going, how can I help? And met the Kevin Beverleys of the world, and Nancy Shockley, and Greg Meekins, and Mayor Rideout. All of these were folks that were at the table trying to figure out, like, what do we do to bring some collective action and some collective impact out of what we're doing here. But when I'd come home and reconnect with friends, it always felt like we were right there as a county, and particularly as Cambridge, and then something would happen and it would just take them backwards, shooting yourself in the foot. I hear the stories of, the person who ran 3 restaurants and then ran off with the money and left everybody hang. It's like, oh my gosh, because I come back and go, wow, Cambridge downtown is getting some good restaurants, that kind of thing. So, from an education standpoint, it's interesting to me because I've spent so much of my career here. I was the editor of the North Dorchester paper before I went in my senior year there. And we went through a middle states evaluation that year. And it was right after, this is 1988, Nation at Risk had come out in 1983 talking about the state of education in the country. The language in the Middle States evaluation that year, in our evaluation, was Dorchester County schools represent the best that American education has today. Mm-hmm. And then as I started working in education for years, I would still, we would evaluate different school districts that we were working with. And I started kind of looking, and it's like, Dorchester's not where it was. And it had a number of years of decline. I mean, we still, as a community, we have a higher level of poverty. We don't get our fair share of resources that really to help us to break out and take that next step. And that's what I really saw when I got back. I saw a lot of really passionate people. I saw a lot of resources that didn't exist, because you bring up the point of people like me coming back. I met a few of those, but I also met some people that were brand new to the community, and we do have the Eastern Shore from here, come here thing, and there's too much emphasis on that. I know I can't change that, but it's like it's going to take a mix of talent. Great, I'm from here. That just because I ate the dirt when I was a kid doesn't mean I'm any better than anybody else. But I learned some things when I was traveling the country, and to bring that and then to mix it in with Kevin Beverly's another example of somebody from here who went and did amazing things and is back to make investments. Yeah. Somebody like John Wyatt, who, came to the Eastern Shore, but then said, I love his expression, like everybody deserves a fair go, and is willing to put resources there. Yeah. And there's so many more examples of people who have come down, and it's this mixture of the people that are from here, that it's a deeply personal thing for them, that they want to see it get better. And then people like me who are from here, it is personal, but also maybe brought some things back to help. And then new resources, like all of that together. I keep using the expression, but I believe that the conditions are right there for us to be able to break through. But it really does take us all kind of finding a way to collaborate, because we're coming at it from different ways, and start in a direction that none of us could have created on our own. Well, I did. I did a lot of this work around the country. I actually got to work in 46 out of 50 states in education. My frequent flyer miles were through the roof, but wasn't great for my personal well-being being on planes like that. It really was. When I started asking some of those community leaders how I can help, it was a lot of the work that I had done in Chicago and Peoria and New Orleans, even in a time when it was like almost, after a devastating thing, there was almost a fresh start opportunity. And in some ways we met it, in some ways it was missed. I mean, from an education standpoint. So it's hard work. It is almost like community organizing, to bring together a group of people that, we want to start our own charter school. Okay, well, do you have a finance person? Do you have, this is not just passion, it's got to come with structure. So moving Dorchester forward, I was happy to be part of getting that started. I'm not involved in it since December of last year. What we did was put the structure in place, and Nancy Shockley, who is an amazing resource for Dorchester County, has really taken that forward with John and Kevin and everybody supporting. I had a great opportunity. I do the consulting that I do. Some of it's off the shore, some of it's here. I'm doing some work now with Rivers and Roads here in Easton, and really love what those guys are doing, more business and leadership, community building focus. So it was great to get that started. And it did feel like once I joined the board, it was, I didn't want there ever to be an opportunity for conflict. So moving Dorchester forward is totally focused on moving Dorchester forward. Dorchester County Schools has got a very specific part of that, and it's a great complement. So I'm really pleased to still be able to work in both of those spaces. So it was an appointment from the county council, and that was the middle of last year, so in June of last year. And it just so happens that the woman who had stepped off was a longtime educator, who Miss Laura Layton, and she had actually been one of my teachers growing up. Yeah. So it was almost just like an honor to step into that. But I used to train school boards as we built them for the charter school networks. So I felt like, okay, this is a 1.5-year appointment. I had no intention of running for the position. So kind of looked at it as a consulting opportunity. Let me come in, see what I can do to help bring people together. There were some foundational things that we needed to figure out. I mean, the future of the superintendent was in question at that point. The budget needs that everybody knew, this ESSER fiscal cliff was coming, blueprint, just some big challenges that I felt like, okay, for this period of time, I can definitely contribute. One of the things that's clear in school boards, and even your orientation onto a school board, but I used to train other people on this, is the school board is about establishing the what and the why. Like, what are we trying to do? We're trying to create a best education pathway and plan for kids as possible. Why are we doing it? Because we want to be that opportunity for them to create successful pathways for themselves. But the how, that's for educational experts. I have some pretty good educational background, but I've never been a superintendent. I taught in the classroom for 2 years. My job has been more bringing different partners together to improve education. So I've been able to do some good things, but the stuff that they do day to day, I mean, what teachers do every day, I mean, we all say it, but it's like, yeah, God love them for the special skills that it requires, and coming out of COVID with additional mental health supports that were needed for students. And there was a lot going on. And I do believe my observations were that the board too often got into the how, telling the superintendent what they wanted to do versus the role should be. I mean, this question around alternative education now, the role of the school board is to say, okay, we need better alternative education. We need alternatives for students who have additional needs and additional supports. And you put that out there, but it's up to the superintendent and the executive team and the teachers and the community to say, now, how are we going to do that? What is that going to look like? And that the board had really gotten into a place where those roles were a little too reversed. I mean, and I understand, at least intellectually, what some board members were trying to push for, of what we've got now is not working, so we need to do something differently. But it's still not up to the board to decide what that differently is. It really is up to that superintendent who has that expertise to come forward with a recommendation. And I see my job as a board member is to hear that, ask some questions, challenge, poke some holes in it, not to say no, but to say, all right, have you thought about these things so that we can come up with the best solution possible? And, I'm a big proponent of, after the work that I've done, of that shouldn't even be the superintendent in a vacuum. They bring a team in of experts to break that apart and decide what's best, and go out to the other stakeholders, talk to the students, talk to the parents, talk to the business leaders. I said it the other night, we can never go wrong by bringing more people to the table and creating a solution. Now, at the end of the day, it's the superintendent's decision of what to come forward. And it's up to us as a board to say yes or no on big, important things like that.
Once you got under the hood, so to speak, was it more sobering? Was it
more from a cultural standpoint? So I think I had a pretty good understanding of what the challenges were in the schools. And that came from the work with moving Dorchester forward and kind of working in the community for a couple of years before that. I led the Chamber Education Committee for, I think Bill Christopher runs an amazing chamber down in Dorchester. And every single time that he asked the business community for something specific, they responded in amazing ways. Like, there are resources there that haven't totally been tapped because they need to know what the schools need. So I think I had a good sense for what the needs were there. I think culturally, yeah, we still had a lot of work to do to make sure we were clear on our role with the board and that we were enabling and empowering school leadership to do what they needed to do. So I think some of the ways that we operated from a culture standpoint, the ways that we communicated, I mean, they're also, school boards are tough. Like, I'm still to this day, I'm one vote. I might have 30 years experience in education and somebody else not, but I'm representing the people that I was appointed to represent. Some people are representing the people they were elected to represent. That's an important thing for each of us to weigh. And it doesn't mean we're always going to agree. It doesn't, there are going to be disagreements, but we need to be able to professionally have a conversation, recognize those disagreements, and then solve for it.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I believe in that collaboration so much. Like collaboration is you and I putting an idea in front of a table and walking away only when it's better. And it might not be what either one of us put on the table to begin with, but it's the best solution that we're able to create. And I believe that we can do that on school boards. But, you know, when I got a peek under the hood, there was definitely a challenged culture in being able to do that made it pretty challenging.
So over the last year, would you say things have improved on that front?
In a lot of ways, yes. I think I still say, and I said it a year ago, there are amazing things going on all around Dorchester County that people don't even realize. Like I would like to see more of the storytelling of the great success stories. We've got some new leaders in buildings that, you know, first year, I mean, there are two different elementary schools in Hurlock and Choptank that are two very challenging environments. And I went to Hurlock, that was my elementary school. And we've got two new principals there that were in their first year that I think have done amazing work and set foundations moving forward. I think there is more community engagement and more groups that are kind of lining up saying, we're ready to partner with you and move forward. Just like that business community, just like moving Dorchester forward, All for Love, Harvesting Hope, all of these nonprofits that want to help. But because there were some of those cultural questions, it didn't always feel to people like it was welcome or that they were going to be brought to the table to be part of the solution. We just did that superintendent search and did a community survey and then did 3 community visioning meetings where we sat down with the community and said, what do you tell us as a board you need to see in this? Over 900 people responded. I thought that was remarkable for Dorchester County, that there was that much insight and passion, and then we used that in making the decision that we made to select Dr. Thompson. And I feel really good about that because it doesn't come back to Chris Wheedleton's opinion or any other member of the board. It came back to, this was what the community told us they wanted to see, and this individual represents that in a significant way. So it really is something that I think that all of the conditions are right. I think there have been amazing improvements. And I do think that there are still challenges in front of us. I mean, that last week was a very challenging board meeting. There have been some challenges to get to a decision that I think was the right decision. I mean, Vision Quest has a great facility there. They offer some really neat solutions. And from the start, I called out that I did not think this contract was in the best interest of Dorchester County Public Schools. And I didn't feel then that my voice was heard. And then, you know, it kind of culminated in the decision this year, you know, 2 weeks ago, to go forward with a vote on this year's budget without even answering my questions or including me in the process. That definitely kind of really brought to the forefront that this is not how it's supposed to work. This is not the collaborative democratic process that it should be. And I felt compelled that I needed to at least call that out.
Fill in the blanks. What happened?
I think the challenges were, it was a challenging budget process. You know, all school districts are facing this now, where there were funding that were related to ESSER funds that are going away. So there is this little kind of cliff of like funds that were used that were almost post-COVID funds that are now gone as beginning this September. So all of a sudden your budget becomes a little bit more challenging, and we went through a rigorous process. I think our board president was right in being intentional about looking at all of the budget questions and then kind of going line by line with a build up to make sure that we were really looking at everything. And I fully supported that process. The finance committee consists of the superintendent, the finance chair, the board president, the vice president in our case. And they did supply regular communications on what they were talking about. But all the way back in January, I started identifying, you know, hey, we need clarity on the process. We need to let the community know. There should definitely be a community engagement where they get to see what challenges we're up against and what priorities we're using or we're determining that we need to follow to really build this whole budget. And that was not clearly laid out. Me as a board member didn't get to see that. And I kept asking those repeatedly. I documented, you know, I wasn't documenting, but when I went back and looked, it was pretty clear that I had asked on numerous occasions, both in writing and verbally, what this process is going to be. And then last Monday, they held a special board meeting, which I knew about. On the agenda, it said, the budget. And I said, well, one, I have a work conflict. I cannot be there. I'm one of my largest clients in Baltimore. I needed to be across the bridge. And two, I still haven't received answers to my questions on this budget, including very deep foundational ones of, are we clear on the revenue that we're even receiving that we're basing this on? And those questions weren't answered. I said, I'm going to be working with this client for 2 days. On Wednesday morning, I will go and look at the video, and then I'll identify any questions or feedback that I have. And when I looked at the video, that's when I discovered that they had not only presented the budget, but they moved forward with a voted to approve it. They were able to do that because they had a quorum. And as I said in my comments then at the board meeting following that, they were allowed to do that, but that doesn't mean it was right.
In an executive session, this came up, right?
Yes.
And words were said,
There was a board member who was very upset that, and again, it's closed session. I will respect the rules and can't really say what was said in there, but it was a verbally attacking behavior of, you shouldn't have, communicated to the public what was really going on. This was a miscommunication that should have been handled in-house. And there were very real questions in the community of everything that was going on because we haven't been as transparent as we need to be. We've had a lot of closed sessions that I think we followed all the rules. I don't believe there's anything where we're not compliant, but at the same time, we're not doing the things to engage the community and let them know what we're doing so that there's transparency. I think that that's a responsibility of the board to be clear in communicating how we're working through things. And a good budget process, in my experience, would be bring all those stakeholders in, say, okay, here are the real challenges. Like, we don't have the funding that we had a year ago. Here's some of the decisions that we think we need to make, and then have other people at the table to say, well, have you thought about this? Or maybe this is a better idea. And we didn't do that. And we said we were. And I think that's at the core of my concerns is we didn't do what we said we were going to do.
One board member resigned. Without getting into that particular person's decision, how do you personally think about the future after something like this happens?
Yeah, it's tough because anybody who knows me knows me speaking out like I did. And I think I was pretty clear in my comments of that I didn't want to have to take that approach. I am a collaborator. I want us to figure out a way to solve problems and go forward in a way where we can do it collectively. And unfortunately, multiple times where I kept, again, if my questions aren't answered and they're ignored, and then when I raised them, I'm met with kind of a dismissive, condescending, you need to get on board. I mean, there have been even comments since then of, you're asking too many questions. You're looking for too much information, and we need to push forward. I mean, I understand the urgency, but I also understand that everybody needs equal information to be able to draw the best conclusions. I mean, it is truly what's everything we have so that we can make the very best decision in that moment. And that's what I try to do as a board member. And I felt like this needed to be called out so that people understood some of those challenges. I didn't go out posting on Facebook. I responded to some questions that people had out there where they were putting inaccuracies out there. And I want to be really clear with, what the truths are, and that at this point we need to work together moving forward. I mean, we have an intention to have a board retreat this summer. We have a new superintendent who has a very assertive plan that we want to be able to support. He earned the job by kind of showing us that plan, and I think he's done a really good job in the time where he's been our interim of really understanding what's there. So from a standpoint of moving forward, like that becomes the opportunity is to really get aligned behind that plan, make sure that we're supporting them and doing the things that I said earlier of, really empowering them to be the educational experts moving forward with us as a check and balance. But I also think that when I talk about the conditions that exist in Dorchester, we've got a new county manager. We've got a county council that has worked really intentionally around working together and building plans forward. With a new superintendent, to me, it feels like a very great opportunity for us to sit down and say, we don't need to start working on next year's budget right now, but let's start building relationships and let's start talking about same thing. What are the challenges? County council has challenges. School board has challenges. We just came from hearing from the state superintendent talking about blueprint, and Britt Kerwin very passionately talking about the value of blueprint. And immediately there were some challenges that came from several of the districts to say, we've got to have some help in Annapolis to make sure that you're not just throwing it out there to us and then you're saying, well, fight amongst yourselves in the counties for it. I want the county council and the school board to be working together moving forward. And I think that that's a great opportunity to do so. So, that was one of my biggest pieces of heartburn about speaking out the way that I did, is that I didn't speak to anything that wasn't a truth. I tried not to make it personal. There were no name calling, as has been inferred. It really was speaking to truth with an intention to say, and we've got to improve. And that's the school board. And I was very specific in my comments that I am a member of that, and I owe it to the community to find a way to work together to move forward.